beat, getting French toast. Tokyo, sake sipping in the robe. Yo, Japan, done my oak, we got the toe. Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I got that. I got that thing. I got that thing. Yeah, I got that thing. I'm not bragging, yeah, I'm not the type to boast. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't dope. Imitators, yeah, they all doing the most. I'm the original, nothing coming close. Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I got that. I got that thing.
Avec sucre, j'en ai trop envie, trop envie.
I got that thing. I got that thing. Yeah, I got that thing. I got that thing. Yeah, I got that thing.
Je veux des French toast avec du sucre. Le matin, le soir, j'en veux tout le temps.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to a very special Photo Joseph live show. Today, we are doing a live panel discussion with a bunch of my colleagues from around the world to talk about this whole new world that we're in of having to do all of our big work online. So essentially, the idea here for today's discussion is we are used to working, what we're talking about is being used to working with big projects, big files, big jobs, big events that go along with big files and sometimes big budgets. And now suddenly we have to do all of this from home or maybe from our private studios. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, how we're going to make the transition to working online. It'll be interesting to see how many people on the panel think it's going to stay that way versus going back to the old way once this whole pandemic thing is all over. Now, we're going to start off with a series of introductions. And in the introductions, everybody's going to tell you where they're calling in from, because I think you'll find it interesting that not all of us live in big cities where you might expect people who do what we do to be living in. So let's get started here by bringing up the panel. Alex, Lindsay, good morning. Give us a little introduction of yourself. All right, on. And where are you calling in from today? Awesome. Gary Adcock, you're up next. Okay, hold on one second. I've just been told that they're not hearing you guys. So that is, I'm sure, on my end. Let me make sure. People are saying they got no sound. Let's make sure we got it now. Typical high-end event. We're already screwed up. Yep, everybody's saying cannot hear the speakers. Oh, that's just fabulous. What have I done wrong here? All right, say something, Gary.
Well, talking about what we're going to do today and what collaboration is when you work independently of your main facility.
Okay, so let's see here. Are they hearing you now? Still saying muted. Good grief. Oh, that's just
Still
fabulous.
sounds muted.
Still muted. Brilliant. Well, this is what happens when you don't plan. Gary, keep talking for me. I gotta figure out where this is coming from.
Well, and a lot of people don't think about what all this means. You know, we're talking about in environments and media and content away from our base stations. You know, how do you do this stuff?
Okay, wait, it is working now. Okay, well, let's just wrap this whole thing and start all over again. Alex, with you. Hey.
You just want to re-rack it from the start?
Yeah, let's just start from the start because we were muted. We've got it now. I neglected to set the audio coming from the computer, which is where we're actually streaming from, to the live show. So let's try this again. Alex, give us an intro.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I'm the head of operations from 090 Media, 090.media, and I specialize in virtual events. I have for about the last decade. Done a couple thousand, and then before that, I was building I was doing online events for myself, to teach people how to do visual effects. So that's my background, and I'm coming in from Novato, California, not Nevada, but Novato, and it's in Marin County, just north of San Francisco.
Awesome, thank you, Alex. All right, Gary, off to you again.
Yeah, hi. I'm a workflow specialist based in Chicago, and I've been dealing with remote workflows and collaboration for a very long time, mostly on the content creation side. So I'm one of those guys who lives life on the road, learned to cut on the road in that, and what we're in right now fundamentally changes all of our lives for the future. So
that it does. And where are you?
I'm in Chicago, like I said. So
Chicago,
I'm
there you go.
Based in downtown Chicago.
Downtown Chicago. So you're in one of the big cities. All right, Felipe, how about you, my friend?
Hey. So I have a very small company here in Prague, in Czech Republic. We do production, post-production, and I work also with consulting, creating workflows for people to collaborate, very similar to what Gary does. And but I probably have like half of the experience that he has, or probably 1/4 of the experience that he has, or almost nothing if you compare all of you guys together there. And a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Felipe. And you bring to the table a piece of software that you work with that we're going to talk about a lot that is integral to people working remotely, which is a big part of why you're on the channel today, on the call today. Chris Fenwick, my friend, tell us about yourself.
I've been doing fast turnaround edits for over 3 decades. I started them in the late 80s, travel, mobile, moving stuff around. I currently work at I'm the lead editor at Slice Editorial in Oakland, California, but I'm at my home out in the valley in Rancho Cordova, a little tiny town outside of Sacramento.
And Jem, that brings it to you.
Jem Schofield of the C47, do production services, a road warrior like many people on this panel. A lot of consulting, a lot of training and education, and I would say that one of my wheelhouses is creating educational content for people in this industry related to video production and filmmaking. And I've been prepping for this unknowingly for 20, 25 years. I work from home. The weird thing is not traveling right now. But it's a very different thing. And I currently live about an hour southwest of Portland, Oregon. So I'm sitting on a hill in the countryside and hoping with my fingers crossed that we get faster internet here sooner rather than later. And that's my deal. So yeah.
Excellent, which is one of course, the big limitations to doing remote work. If you can't get decent internet, it does make things a challenge. It is one of the prerequisites, but fortunately that is changing rapidly, and I think a lot of us are getting better internet. So I'm your host, Photo Joseph. I'm a content creator based out of a small town in Southern Oregon called Ashland, and do the YouTube show and do things like this and bring people together and try and talk about the challenges of today. So the first thing that I want to address is events, and mainly because every one of us on this panel would have been involved with or attended NAB. NAB, for those who don't know, is a big broadcast show that happens every year in Las Vegas in April. We should be heading out there in just a couple of weeks, but about, I guess, 3 weeks ago or so, 2-3 weeks ago, it was officially canceled, which obviously was necessary and the right thing to do. And that turned tons of things upside down. Companies that were planning product launches no longer can be there. It's been a really interesting thing to see how the industry scatters to try and accommodate what they lost there. But I want to talk first about how you can possibly replace an event like that virtually. And the question is going to go to Alex first, because this is a big part of what you do, Alex. I want to hear from you your thoughts on moving events like NAB virtual. It's one thing to take a conference that's just a speaker speaking to an audience virtual. That's easy. But an event like NAB, where people are used to walking the show floor, seeing things that they haven't seen before, discovering new products, getting their hands on it, asking the hard questions. How do we move something like that virtual?
Well, I think that one of the things we want to think about is to back away from trying to reproduce a conference and look at what we're actually trying to do. We're trying to connect with people. We're trying to educate them about an idea or about a product. We're trying to let them connect to each other. So when we get back to these basic pieces of this process, it's actually easier to think about a solution, because right now what we see is a lot of people trying to build a conference that looks like a conference. You know, you can walk into the lobby and you can see the booths, and then you can walk up and ask a person questions. And that's what I call skeuomorphism, you know, event skeuomorphism, you know, which is that we want it to look just like the event. But the problem is we basically we're reproducing, with all the restrictions of an event, we're reproducing the event. And then we have other restrictions that are added to the online. What we want to do is only deal with the restrictions of online, which is bandwidth, which is, you know, how do we get people connected? What we don't want to do is try to restrict ourselves. The reason that we have a big event is because it costs a lot of money to bring all that equipment to one place. We're all paying for hotel rooms, all of those things. So the first thing that you start to think about is stretching it out. Why are we doing this all in, you know, why are we doing it all in 3 days? Because we all got there and we only have a certain amount of time, and we're paying for hotels, and everyone, you know, there's a big thing there. But once we get out of that, we can start having regular meetings. We can start having, you know, releases. We can start having more conversations with our clients, and with, you know, and customers. And so, and that ongoing relationship, I'll argue, is more powerful if you take this, you know, if you take all the money and all the effort that you're doing and you spread it out over a year online, you're going to have a better relationship with those clients than you're ever going to get in a, you know, in a process. You know, you know, a good example is I was just talking to the folks at ClearCom. They have this little box that I have one here. I've been testing this little LQ box, and we use the LQ box for this little point-to-point connections. Oh, I want to connect a remote room to my ClearCom head end. And we just send them one and we say, okay, you got 2 wire out, and you'll just go into your production and we're done. Then I find out later from somebody else that I can actually connect iPhones to my LQ box. And I've been going, that's been there for years and I didn't know. And so the thing is that kind of education, you know, and I'm a guy that has, over some period of time, bought hundreds of thousands of dollars of ClearCom equipment. You know, so it's not like it, you know, so it's, you know, it would be good if I knew that, you know. And so the thing is that constantly educating people on what the products do, answering their questions, being connected to them is now more possible than it ever has been in the history. You know, with Zoom, which is what we're in right now, you can have these conversations all the time. You can be putting out videos and then discussing those, and your audience is going to learn more from that than a rushed, tired, you know, version on an expo floor. The big mistake people make is that you look at the investment. So a small booth, let's say 20 by 20 booth, with all the union costs, all the travel costs, the space costs with NAB, it's probably $100,000. Like that's probably what they're spending on that. But what the mistake is people go, okay, now we want to, if we're going to go online because it's easy, you know, live streaming is easy, right? We want to spend $10. We want to spend $10. We want to spend $1,000. Well, if they started spending $75,000, you know, instead of $100, or $50,000 instead of $100, they'd start getting events that were watchable. And the problem we end up with right now is that without a budget and with the you know, the PR people just kind of turning the camera on, you're not getting something that's really watchable. And so not a lot of people watch, and without doing it over and over and over again, you're not building up that audience. And so the issue is that people aren't giving it a chance, and then they're giving up on it. But the reality is that it makes way more sense to not limit yourself to the people who could afford to go to NAB, and really, you know, be able to be connected to people all the time. And this is something that I think, and there's some brands that have figured this out and are doing lots of this. And you don't notice it that much. Google has like open hours where they work with their developers. You've got, you know, there's all kinds of other people who are doing these kinds of things, and we don't see it because they just do it all the time. And that makes a huge difference, because the easiest way to add value to your product is education. You know, we buy these products, and you know, we use them for what we know how to use them for, but there's all these other little things that they spent millions of dollars developing, or hundreds of thousands of dollars developing, that little button that nobody uses, you know, because no one knows what it does. And so, you know, and then when someone knows how to use it and knows why your product is different, they're more likely to buy more of your products. They're less likely to buy somebody else's product, because they're educated about that. And so there's a huge opportunity for people to do that. One of the things is that you don't want to do just a straight stream. So what we have found over and over and over again, and it started with a Pixel Core, you know, 2 decades ago, and we've seen it over and over in all the interactive events, is when you're interacting with your audience is when you start to see higher engagement, you see longer view times, you see people are connected. It makes more impact when you're actually dealing with the comments. And so that's why we've done a lot of work on comment engines and all kinds of other things, because that is what is going to keep people connected to it, is having that conversation. And so we have to get away from, we're still in this kind of, again, broadcast skeuomorphics of, we're going to do TV and then put it on the web. But we have all these other tools. We can be interacting in real time with our audience. And when we do that, we move away from a broadcast and really more towards a conversation. And what I tend to call the two things that I think about a lot are scalable conversations. Mm-hmm. How do we scale a conversation to thousands of people? And also and to do that, we build centerless events. So the centerless event is the production is in all over the world. The hosts are all over the world. The viewers are all over the world. And we build systems that allow us to have that work seamlessly. And it's not hard, but it's not just something you're going to throw together on your laptop either. So those are the things that you have to kind of challenge yourself. And it's a whole new set of tools. It's a whole new language to do this. And not many people are doing it, but I think that this is going to force a lot of people to think about it, because we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know if it's going to come back. You have to start building other ways of doing this and assume that you can't get more than 50 people in one place for maybe 2 years. How am I going to do that if I can't bring groups together? And I think when we get to the end of that, there's a lot of people that will go back, but I think we're going to see, probably my guess is we're going to see a reduction of live events, live industry events by about 30%, 30 to 40%. And so that's, and it's not going to go to zero, sure, but it's also not going to go back to 100. So you're going to see, and then that's going to slowly eat it up, where we see less and less big live events, because once people get it working, once these tools get better, because now there's all this money rushing into these companies to make these tools better. So these tools are going to get better a lot faster. I mean, a year ago or 2 years ago, I was trying to raise money to build virtual events, like to really build it, software and everything else. Trying to explain to people that virtual events was the future was like trying to explain a car to someone who's never seen one, and so, and now everybody understands it. So now there's a whole bunch of interest in this process, and that's going to drive development, and that's going to drive solutions that work. And then that's going to, really have people question whether they're, like a big corporation will do the same event 60 times around the world in a tour. Where if they did it online, they could do it 6 times to cover all the time zones comfortably, and they could put way more money into it and have a much smaller carbon footprint and have it, and have a much better connection than they had with the live version. And they just have to get out of the mindset that they have, and that's a hard thing, because the event teams are all in that mindset. Their vendors are all in that mindset. The vendors who they're working with in events are going to constantly tell them why it's important for everyone to be in person, because they make a lot of money if everybody's in person, and not so much if you stream it.
So, on the line there. Yeah.
So that's going to be the thing.
So this really addresses the idea of how to replace a trade show, what you replace it with. This online event, talking to your customers more directly, spreading that out instead of just being 3 days, it's all year long. You can have your launch events. We saw Apple do this a decade ago when they stopped doing Macworld, stopped doing trade shows entirely. And then moved them to their own launch events. And now, of course, they're going virtual with WWDC. And that's great for a company like Apple that everybody knows and everybody's heard of, and anybody who cares about Apple is going to find their event. But how do you, as a smaller company, and I want someone else to try and address this question, how as a smaller company do you get that word out? Right. One of the advantages of the show like NAB is that wandering the floor aimlessly and bumping into some company you've never heard of before, with some cool new product that suddenly you realize you need in your life and you never knew even existed. As a smaller company, how do you do that? Because I think that's, especially in this audience today, we're not going to have the Apple and the Cisco and the Google watching us today. Everybody watching is going to be a small company, small industry trying to get their word out. So how do they get that out there?
Yeah, I mean, I can say that from my standpoint, we're all content creators, and our responsibility is to figure this out. Alex is figuring it out at a scale that is different than I'm figuring it out.
Sure.
But what I need to do is I need to create solutions for my clients who are now looking to do what Alex is talking about, but not at an NAB scale. So how do they engage? Yeah, how do they engage with their audience? And part of that is for us to figure that out. And I'm far less interested in creating YouTube content now that's just, here's how to do something. I'll create a course platform for that. And I'm far more interested for my own brand and my clients, creating a platform where they can engage with, their potential customers, with their audience for their products and or services.
And I think that this actually, I'll argue that this is actually more, what I'm talking about is more applicable to smaller companies than to larger companies. Larger companies have big infrastructure. They have set ways of doing things. They have, the way that they've always done it. And it's unsafe if you're in a corporate environment to start talking about experimenting with online stuff. And if a lot of people don't show up, that's affecting your job. So I think that it's a difficult thing for corporate to kind of go down that path. Whereas in a smaller piece, this means that you're no longer constrained by geographic reference. So you're now able to figure out how to get out there. And that's going to be a mixture of producing content. You just have to produce it. And it doesn't have to be these conversations that we're having. Just to start experimenting with it, I'm doing every day at 7 a.m. I'm opening up for an hour and just talking to people about media, let's just talk about this stuff and we'll see what happens. The point is that that's not hard. There's no lift. There's no budget to that. It's just me having a conversation with folks about media. But the thing is that that's the kind of thing that other companies could do all the time. Open sessions where they're just having these conversations with people who have a question. Yeah, they can call customer support, but there's something about having something all the time where you're really talking to people and seeing them and hearing other people's questions. What's important is not the one-on-one. Like someone today asked me about building comms for virtual events. And I went on a tirade about how you build a centerless event and use IP and mix it with Dante and do all this other stuff. Now, half the people that were watching probably had never had to think about that. But that person asking that question and bringing it up, now they all have some idea in their head that it's possible. And that group conversation becomes really important. And what it takes is being willing to do it all the time, and being able to hammer that all the time. And then you start mixing in marketing. Once you figure out how to make it relatively interesting, now you're doing targeted ads on Facebook. You're doing, all the other bits and pieces that you have to get the word out.
Yeah. Gary, you're trying to get a word in here.
But yeah, it's the other thing about this is the people who come in and try to do the events for nothing. And you kind of skimmed over that in the beginning, Alex, but people come in and put the same amount of time and effort that they did going to NAB, going to IBC, going to the big shows, and put the same amount of dollars into their online trafficking and messaging. They do a whole lot better, but they don't, because they don't think they need a camera crew. I mean, I'm here working on my iPad. Everybody else is on a real camera. Because I had a setup, I couldn't tear down my computer. So, but it's one of those things that it just shows the level with which you can do things, and people take it into account.
We used to have this joke. We take behind the scenes photos because we were the white glove hangout team for Google for a couple of years, and so we did over 1,000 of these hangouts, and we would take pictures of our kits because we were lopping on anywhere from $10,000 to $500,000 worth of hardware in front of a hangout, to make it all work. And we used to take these little pictures and send them to each other and say, because hangouts are easy, because that's what everyone wanted to think of, is like hangouts are easy, and. But the thing is to make it all work at the level, as you're saying, Gary, to make it work in the level that we expect. And the hard part people have is they understand a model. The people who show up at those booths understand that model, and they just don't understand live and what it takes to do it.
Yeah,
which is funny because you see it on television every day. You see the difference in the quality of technology watching news. Around the world right now, where everybody's home quarantined from every space, and half of the feeds are on low bandwidth phones and some are on really good computers. And it's really interesting to see how even the news media is willing to accept a lesser quality for some of the content they're producing than we would as advertisers or marketers.
Yeah, Felipe, you've got something to add.
Yeah, I know. I had just a little comment because we can actually see now, for example, let's say Trevor Noah. He has his show on Comedy Central, right? And they are facing those challenges right now. But there is another thing that's also worth mentioning is that broadcast specifically has been doing things a specific way, and they never really have the willingness to actually change things. So right now they have been forced to change things, and they're going through a very hard time, and they're putting out content that is subpar to YouTube creators, for example. YouTube creators can create way higher quality than what broadcasters are doing right now on YouTube because they're having to do it from home. And in a way, it's kind of inexcusable, but unfortunately, they have been put in a very bad situation. They had all their bells and whistles for them in their studios, but so right now everyone went from luxury to home. So what it is in between? How can we help them to do this transition, for example?
A lot of it is that if you're number one is, and I have this strong opinion that if someone is a public figure, they should make sure that any chance that there's going to be an interview, they should have a strong bandwidth, a good mic, good camera, some lights somewhere in a closet somewhere, because you just don't know when you're going to be asked to be interviewed about something. And now we really see that. A lot of it though is preparation. So when we do an event, we did an event for Patreon last week, and it went 3 hours, tightly scheduled, 5 minutes here, 3 minutes there. We're going to have someone look at the chili. We're going to do this thing. Now, the thing is that we spent a week and a half calling every creator, working with them, trying to get them on Ethernet, trying to get a better camera. We were drop shipping stuff to them. We were trying to make it, all those things to work, finding a better location for them, having them move around, figuring out the framing of exactly what's going to go on behind. And it didn't end up being perfect because we didn't have enough time, and we couldn't send webcams because they don't exist anymore. I mean, they're just out of it.
That's a real problem. Yeah.
So the issue is, and for years when we were doing these Google events, we had 20 boxes of kits, lights, camera, and we would just airship them to people to get them tuned up. And then you end up, when you give Skype especially, but also Zoom and Hangouts to some degree, when you give it good bandwidth and a solid camera and everything else, it is competitive with broadcast.
Sure.
It is as good and oftentimes better than broadcast in that sense. And if you look at like a Mac break is a good example where all of us have kind of turned the dials up slowly over time. It doesn't look that much different than a broadcast connection, because we've done it 700 times, so that's, that's part of the, and they're doing it first time. And when you work with broadcasters, they have this whole thing, like they just think all of that is crap, and they don't, and so to them, it's whether, when they think of like an online connection to someone's house, to them, it's like you're choosing between brown crap and green crap, but it's all crap,
time to change the tune.
Right, but they don't have any sense of that it could be at least incrementally better. And
so let's talk about that a little bit, because we're getting a lot of questions already about the hardware and software side of this. And people are specifically asking how we're doing this today, because what they're seeing looks like Zoom, but it's better quality than what they get, and how we're getting it to YouTube. So I want to pivot the discussion into the technological side of it, what you need to make this happen. But I want to start by describing how we're doing what we're doing today, just because this is what people are actually seeing. So yes, this is a Zoom Hangout. What I'm doing is broadcasting this to YouTube, but not using Zoom's own technology. Zoom does have the ability to broadcast live to any platform, but it only broadcasts at 720p. So what I'm doing is I have my Zoom interface full screen in the gallery view, and if I bring my mouse up on the screen, you can see there is the Zoom interface, and that is what is being broadcast right now. I am mirroring that screen through an ATEM Mini, which is then going into a hardware encoding device to stream to the internet, and it's streaming to, not to YouTube Direct, but to a service called Restream.io. Restream.io is then turning around and streaming that out currently to Facebook, Twitch, Periscope, LinkedIn, Vonkont in Russia, because why not, and to YouTube Live, of course. And so we're streaming live to all those places simultaneously right now. And because I'm streaming my screen, which is at 1920 by 1080, we're getting that quality of an image out. Now, obviously, what everybody's seeing from all the guests is going to be dependent on their feed. So some people's feeds are a little bit chunkier than others, depending on their bandwidth. But that's how we're doing this. And then there's the camera side of it. I know most of us here have a good camera on, so that's a DSLR or mirrorless camera through some kind of an interface. In my case, it's going through the ATEM Mini. And then lighting. I've got lighting in here. Many of you have set up nice custom lighting. Philippe's got a beautiful background in there. Building that custom background is a big part of what you can do to make it look good. And that all goes into it. And back to what Alex was saying about having that gear in your closet so you're ready to go, a huge part of looking good is building it up in advance and setting it up with lighting. You got to think about the camera, the microphone, the lighting, the backdrop. That's all a big part of it.
Well, and one of the things is that I use it for everything. So what happens is it allows me to iterate. When you only use it for broadcast, so every Zoom meeting I have, I have a Blackmagic Micro, and I run this thing through a switcher. So there's a bunch of, so I have a bunch of tools, but I'm using them all the time. I'm using them 6 or 7 times a day for different, just regular video meetings, which is not a bad marketing thing if you're talking to people about doing virtual events. But the point is that I'm constantly iterating. And when I see it, I go, oh, I don't really like that. I don't really like that. Like today I switched to green screen, which is now just gray because I don't have any background that I want to use yet, but I'm testing it, and so I'm constantly iterating this process. And the only way to have it work, setting up the first time is never going to be as good as if you've done it, 40 times by the time you need it.
Of course. Yeah. So hardware-wise, someone else just asked as well what encoder I'm using. Let's talk about that side of it and what you need. So the encoder that I'm using is from a company called Epiphan. It's the Pearl 2, which is a very large, expensive, high-end encoder, which is way beyond what I would need to do this. I'm only using it because the company lent it to me to do videos on. But that allows me, the Pearl on its own allows me to feed inputs into it, do the switching on there, and do the encoding and recording. It's kind of an all-in-one box, but it's also $8,000. So it's not something that you're just going to buy for fun. But you can do your encoding in much smaller hardware, and you can also do it in software. But obviously, maybe not obviously, but when you start doing it in software, you do get into some other challenges. And Alex, it's entirely Alex's fault that I moved to hardware in the first place. I'd like to say that Alex doesn't know any problem that he can't fix with $10,000 in hardware. So, Alex, what was the currency? The one Alex, what was the currency from the old Twit days?
And Alex was $700.
$700. I think with inflation, that's probably more like $2,000.
That's right. Everything seems a lot less expensive if you do it in increments of $700. It's like, it's like 2.5 Alexes, And so, the main thing is that you can get a lot done with just software. So you're going to get a reasonable stream with OBS. You're going to get a reasonable stream with Wirecast, with vMix. They're all capable of doing those things, and you really don't need hardware until you really start to scale. And now the reason that we use hardware encoders is often because we are going to get a higher quality. Right. So if you're using an Elemental, it is going to give you a higher quality stream than what you're getting out of OBS. It also tends to be, less sensitive. You're not losing, like if you start pushing your home computer that's doing OBS and you're trying to switch on it and you're trying to do other things and you add a bunch of graphics, you may start losing frames on your encode because your processor can only do so much. So a lot of times if we're going to stream, we usually want that encoder to be, that's all it's doing. That laptop is just encoding. It's not, we're not trying to do a bunch of things. And that's been the hard part we've had. You either have to have a very powerful computer to run it, or you need to have a separate computer do that. When you start doing hardware encoding, we're starting to worry about captions. We're starting to worry about integrating with larger ones. We're starting to worry about being remote. Like on my Elementals will be sitting, in Washington, D.C., we log into them and turn them on and do all the things we need to do. Also, when you're just streaming to YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, all these things, and if you're not using Restream, Restream is great because it just kind of redistributes all of those for you. And so you still only have one stream. For larger events that we work on that, let's say, are using HLS, I might have to build the whole ladder myself. And if I'm building the ladder myself, that's 8 to 10 different encodes that are coming out of one box. And that's where we start to need to use hardware. What I will say, and I can't say anything more, but we can come back and talk about this in a little while, but I would not buy a hardware encoder right now.
Oh, interesting. Well, that is interesting because the price of hardware.
That's all I got to say. This is not a good time to buy. I know everybody right now is thinking about encoders, and all I can say is, I would not buy one right now.
Well, everybody needs one right now.
You won't have to wait long.
It is actually quite hard to buy one. Things are sold out, right? I did a show recently on the A10 Mini.
And it's saving you.
Yeah. Well, I did a show on the A10 Mini and they're gone. You cannot buy them. They're sold out everywhere. And I talked to Blackmagic and now it's a manufacturing problem, right? They can't get more made out of China. The Epiphan Webcaster X2, which is a tiny little $250 hardware encoder. It's the least expensive hardware encoder I know of. Those were very unfortunately bad timing. They were end of life with intention of something else coming. There was a manufacturing run of those, which the company expected would be enough to hold them until the next product came. Yeah. Oops. coronavirus happened and the X2 sold out. Now you can't get them anywhere. So right now it's an actual problem of buying stuff. And the only things that I see available to buy are the really expensive boxes with people who aren't willing to
There's
spend.
other, and I can't get into it, but I would just wait.
But I do think, Joseph, one of the things that people should be thinking about who are running small to mid-sized businesses is the biggest segment for education for me, for live education, which may just go away, except for on-sites for companies and organizations, which I do, is in-house production. And when this thing starts to settle down a little bit and people start to go back, even in smaller quantity, back to their in-house studios and things that they're doing, because it's not going to be that every company and organization is going to be running a home studio. That's not going to happen.
Right.
They need to be thinking not just about the cameras and the lights and the audio equipment that they're using. They really now need to start to think about where their budget's going to go for this thing that Alex is not telling us about, in terms of their investment to reaching their audience beyond just recorded videos.
Right. Because
the engagement,
And the two of them work so well together. So one of the most successful things that I've done, and I found this by accident almost. I got double booked on a class for a summer camp, and where I don't know what happened, but somehow I'm teaching two classes at the same time. And so I was like, oh, I got to figure it out. And I had a teacher's assistant, so I had some, to kind of help with it. But what I did is I figured out how to give them all a shared folder, and I'd record my little lecture. And I'd say, okay, you guys work on that. And then I'd go into the other one and I'd record a lecture and then have them work on that. And then I just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it was, I had to sleep, for 12 hours a day when I was done. But they learned faster. What I learned very quickly was they were learning faster. These are 8 to 12-year-olds learning faster, doing 3D modeling and photogrammetry and HDR than anybody I'd ever seen before. Not just because they're 8 to 12 and they have really a lot of neural networks in their head, but the fact that they could replay that video over and over again. But what was missing was the discussion. So that's what I was able to do, is go back and discuss it with them. So then we took that to some of the stuff we were doing in Rwanda. And what I would do is I would send here's how to make a flag, flap, a computer graphics flag, flap in Cinema 4D. So here's a 5-minute video, or here's how to make grass, or here, whatever it is. And I'd send it to them, and then I'd give them homework. Go do this, go try it, watch this thing, do it, post your results. And then we have a discussion the next Monday. That was the most powerful way to teach something that I'd ever done, because what we were able to do is I give you something you can replay and that you can discuss it all week, and you can do all those things. And then I'm going to have live. And the problem we see right now with online training is it's all just watching a video, and then you don't have a place to discuss it. You have comments and stuff like that, but you don't have this. The live event ties that together. So taking what, Jem, you're doing with a lot of the recorded videos, and then adding live to it, so that there's going to be a classroom time. But that classroom time, the recorded videos are much better lectures than you're ever going to do live. So don't stop with the lecturing. No more lecturing. It is, what you want to do is send a recorded video, or let people watch a recorded video, and preferably not right before you're going to do the live, but a day before or 2 days before. Let them just digest it, think about what they don't understand, even discuss it amongst themselves. Then have a live one and answer those questions and have that conversation. And that mixture is, I have found that to be lethal to teaching people to do stuff.
Yeah, about 20 years ago, I was involved with a company, and the NAB demo that we did was just a kiosk, a couple monitors over the presenter's head, myself and a couple other people, and people would walk up and ask questions, and we would, answer things, one-on-one. And that kind of communication after that recorded demo that Alex is talking about is invaluable. And about a couple of weeks ago at our company, we sat down and I said, regardless of what happens, with this disease spreading around, people still need to communicate, and having the ability to sit there and answer those questions is invaluable. And that's what we need to keep reminding people. From a business standpoint, you can, cower in place as much as you want, but you still have to communicate. And I want to remind everybody about a little document that was published about 21 years ago called the Clue Train Manifesto. I don't know if any of you remember this. It was posted online. Go to cluetrain.com. It's still there. There was a place where you could sign it. And the Clue Train Manifesto was a statement. It was a warning to large corporations that because of this internet thing, we as consumers have the ability to talk amongst ourselves. And we don't have to just go to you for information. And if you guys don't get a clue, so to speak, and think of that, we're going to just run you over. And we are now living post Clue Train Manifesto. And I would really recommend you go read it. It's an interesting kind of foresight into what we're living now.
Yeah. Well, and it's certainly, that's a really good point to make about expanding from this idea of the event that is now not just one event, it's an all year around thing. It's not just the me to you and a little bit of talking on the side. The whole, that social media thing that's probably going to catch on one of these days as a way to interact with your audience and to be involved in companies that are not paying attention to that. Companies that have, I don't know, but maybe they've got great online training and they've got a great forum to talk to people, but they're ignoring social media. That's a huge untapped resource where they should be paying attention, and the people are going to talk to each other. Like you said, Chris, people talk to each other, and they're going to, if they're doing it on social media, they're doing it on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, and the company's not paying attention, they're going to lose control of their message.
Yeah, I don't think companies are ignoring social media. I just don't think they're using it well.
Right.
And that's really the thing. And I think that us as content creators and service providers, we need to remind ourselves that this is a great example of like the big ship can't turn quick.
Right.
And so some of these big companies, they're stuck in a rut or in a pattern where they've already, they think that this giant event is the only way to get information across. And
right.
It's definitely not.
Well, and again, I think that there's a huge opportunity for companies right now to experiment, because before this, your superiors, wouldn't want to see a failure. Your clients will complain if they can't go to a live event. There's all these things that people have of what the past was, and they're very attached to it. Right now, they're just happy you're trying. They're just happy you're there. And so the thing is that you have there's this one moment for the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months or the next 2 years where we have an enormous amount of opportunity to experiment, to expand what we're doing, and to see what's going to work. And some of it's not going to work. And people are going to give us a pass. Look at all the broadcasters doing what they do.
Sure.
That you're going to get a pass on that because of the constrictions that are required. Good games oftentimes are, the constriction, of what's there. So the restrictions that we have on us right now allow us to do a lot of things at lo-fi. The reason that we got so good at centerless events was because Hangouts were really low quality. So if they didn't work, they were like, it's like the platform is a little unstable and we're doing the best we can. And our quality was all over the place when it began. It worked, like we got it done and it looked better than everybody else's. But I was learning. I mean, I was just trying to figure out how this all was going to work, and the lighting and the cameras and everything else. And so, but we were able to do over 1,000 of those. The thing is right now it's there, everybody's opportunity to do the same thing, which is go out, do a lot of it, iterate, figure out what's working. And then again, you're going to go back to some of the live events when you can, but you may find, like we're working with a retreat location to help them put because they're a retreat location. They're closed if they don't, and everyone's going to be out of a job if they don't figure this out. What we're doing is figuring out how to put it online. Now, at the end of this, they may have a whole new business of people doing it online that adds to what they already do really well. And so there's a lot of places that if people act decisively, that they have a huge opportunity to do a lot of really interesting things.
Yeah. And I just want to say that companies right now who are in any industry can stand out very easily to a certain degree. We are, all of us on this, whatever you call it, panel. First of all, most of us have known each other for a long time, but we're in production, we're in post, we're content creators. If we take a look at our industry, the people who manufacture equipment, I can on one hand, maybe two hands, show you who is actually actively creating ongoing content that's being put out there. And in fact, recently, Canon, who's a company I created content for almost a decade, decided with their restructuring, they were going to stop creating educational content. Ridiculous. This is the best investment for them. I'm not saying there's no education, but it's more marketing than it is education now. They're not investing in creating the stickiness. So in every single industry, if you set yourself up and you start educating your clients on the industry that you're in. Yeah. So that doesn't mean video production and filmmaking. That might be finance. That might be, you know, a nonprofit doing something. If you're there as a voice of education to answer questions, you are immediately going up the ladder in terms of an opinion leader and somebody that people are going to go to for information. And as crappy as that experience is, that you're sitting on hold for 4 hours to talk to your mortgage company, if that mortgage company is creating a forum to talk to people and answer their questions and at least giving them an interaction that goes beyond being on hold for 4 hours to find out if you can defer your mortgage payments, that's really important right now. And you should be thinking about that.
Yeah, education is the new marketing, right? That's a great way to look at it.
It always has been the marketing. Education always has been marketing. Yeah.
Yeah, it has been, but people aren't really doing it. And like what Alex was saying is people need to be focused more on that educational side of it. So to step back and kind of big picture this, what we've been talking about is we started off by talking about replacing an event like NAB. And I think we've pretty well summarized what a company of any size can do. And a big part of this is being out there all the time, creating educational content. Yeah, sure, you create your marketing content, being active on social media, making sure that you're engaged with your customer as much as possible. And the nice thing about that is it does scale. Even a small, like me, I'm a one-man company, one-man operation, and I still manage to get my word out there all over the place because of the internet, because of social media, and so on. And I don't need to attend a trade show as a booth, right? I'm more there as a guest, but as we've discussed, these things can scale. And a big part of that is creating that edited content. So that's where I want to pivot the conversation now into creating the content that will get shown, whether it's the educational, whether it's the marketing, whether it's a highly produced, slick 30-second ad or a 10-hour long classroom session on how to use whatever your product is. And the part of creating that is something that we on the panel, we who are used to editing remotely, sitting in our room and we do what we do, still does involve a degree of personal interaction. You're on set to shoot with a bunch of people. You've got meetings to discuss the planning of what you're going to make and how you're going to make it and so on. And all of that right now, at least, has to be done remotely. So this is where I want the conversation to go. We've got the ability to shoot incredible things as a one-man operation. I think half of us on the panel have setups where we do these kind of things at home on our own or in our studios, whatever, all the time. But then the editing of it is a big part of it. And if you're doing it by yourself, that's easy. You just move the files into your editing room. But Felipe, I want to bring you into this because this is a big part of what you do. How do we manage things like a collaborative workflow where it's not just one person? You've got multiple people, editors, motion graphic artists, musicians, everybody else that is involved into creating a final production. And they're working with really big files, sometimes really, really big files, and they might be now scattered all over the world and they can't come together to a central place. So how do we start looking at editing and post-production in this remote space?
Well, first of all, I think you have to start looking at what your limitations are. What are your weakest chains in your weakest links in your chain, right? So for example, if you have an operation with like 6 people, but one of them has a horrible internet connection, you're not going to put them to receive any original files, for example, obviously. So the assumptions have to start very in the beginning. What are your weakest points in your workflows? The second thing is what it is that you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to remote access into stuff that's in the office and you need to do something with there, or you're looking for restructuring your whole workflow and giving it a new life? And then we can start talking about things, for example, what Michael Cioni was saying, the new series from Frame.io about collaboration. You have a full cloud operation like what Bebop does, and then you have hybrid solutions like what PostLab does. The question is how you want to go about that and how much money you want to spend on that too, because a lot of us, we already have equipment, we already have computers, we have our editing software. Are we prepared to pay $1,000 a month to go full on cloud? So a VM on the cloud, storage on the cloud, originals on the cloud, or would we be looking at a hybrid, let me spend as little as possible solution? So those would be the first questions to be answered. And then once you have an answer to that, which I think for a lot of people is, I'm not prepared to spend any money right now. So what can I do with the equipment that I have, with the skills that I already have? I work on Premiere, on Media Composer, or on Final Cut Pro 10. How can I enable that? And today, incredibly enough, it's not that difficult. Now,
so let's talk about that. Let's assume that you don't want to spend a lot of money. Let's assume it's people like me, who's a solo content creator, but I want to hire Chris Fenwick to do some editing for me. But we live nowhere near each other, so I could FedEx a drive to him with some original media. That's fine, but we need to collaborate daily back and forth. How do we do that in this world today?
Well, even FedEx right now, it's not really that fine to be sending stuff because it might not arrive. Services are not really that reliable right now.
Sure. No, things are taking longer, and you could literally be shipping a virus around the world. So that's obviously a concern as well. So we want to get away from having to ship content. What is the low-cost software solution? Not the $1,000 a month VM in the cloud, but how do we do this on a local, low-cost level?
Oh, obviously, the first question is, will he just do an offline edit for you, or would he be doing an online edit for you? Because if he is going to be...
Chris, what do you do? Offline edits.
I didn't hear that.
I don't believe in offline.
Chris wants to...
By the way, Chris is the best Lobot of this panel today. Okay, I've been scanning, but he's definitely the best Lobot. So
I don't know what
some people will get that.
Okay,
there you
don't
go.
know what a Lobot is either.
It'll be something to go look at.
Okay, so purely technically speaking, and I'm softballing this question to you because I know you have the answer to it. How do I get my files to Chris? I just finished an edit. I've got 50 gigs worth of content, and I got a really fast internet connection. I'm not going to just email him.
I was going to make that assumption.
Yeah,
I was going to make that assumption. Let's assume that you have a very good connection and that Chris has a very good connection. Sure. So then you can start looking at cloud storages or a direct connection between the two of you. A direct connection is not great all the time because that means that the receiving end and the sending end need to be online at the same time, right? Otherwise, if you just have, let's say, media connected to your laptop and then you just close your laptop, it's offline, and Chris is not receiving his media anymore. So that's where cloud storage come in place, and it is very nice. Or maybe you have a Synology box, maybe you have a QNAP box, and you could have your media there that is being sent to your preferred cloud provider. Now, these NAS boxes, for example, they connect to a lot of different object storage solutions and services like OneDrive, Google Drive, all of them except iCloud, because iCloud doesn't have the same types of APIs that the other ones have. But right now, with macOS 10.15.4, for example, if we're talking about people that are on Mac computers, you can just share an iCloud folder and drop your files there and send to him. Okay. So, of course, there will be some file size limitations there, but no problem. Now, being a little bit biased on the part of how to move files around, for example, I have been using G Suite for a very long time. I have been using G Suite since they introduced unlimited storage. And you didn't even need to have 5 users in your account to have unlimited storage at that time. So I have, for example, 2 users, and I have unlimited storage. So for me, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm going to put all my stuff on Google Drive. And I can just give you access, and there you go. You have my media.
Let's talk. Now, I want to hear from you about what you set up for me. And that's what I was saying. I was trying to softball you the question, but the Resilio sync.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I even wonder if I remember what I set up for you. I set up for you a solution that's not a cloud solution.
It's not cloud. Set up for you peer-to-peer. So Resilio Sync and PostLab as a workflow for Final Cut Pro editing, which of course I know Chris works with. So as a Final Cut editor, with that solution, and that's what I want you to talk about. We could easily have a situation where Chris and I have the same media. It's synced seamlessly. We have the same Final Cut Pro project synced seamlessly, and we can be anywhere around the world. And it can be more than just the two of us. It can be multiple people. So tell us a little bit about that workflow.
Well, Resilio, like you said, it's a peer-to-peer connection, and it works based on BitTorrent technology. So it's actually the guys that created BitTorrent created Resilio, And it's a very nice solution, mainly when you start adding more users. So if you add more computers, they all start sending stuff together at the same time to each other. So for example, when one person has one file and needs to send to 5 people, Resilio is sending, and then once the second person has those blocks, you start sending to the third and the fourth. So you start aggregating everyone's connections to be able to move those files. So once you aggregate a lot of people, it's very fast. But peer-to-peer, we are going to be limited to your upload speed, and if that's higher than Chris' download speed, his download speed, right?
Sure.
Okay, good. So that's how you're sharing your files. But until...
And just sorry to interrupt, but just so that people understand, and once that's set up, there's literally folders in my computer, and they can be on any hard drive that I drop a file into, and immediately start showing up on Chris's side. And so if I finish a shoot, I start copying all my assets into there. At some point, Chris will start seeing those right away. He's going to start seeing them show up, and at some point, he'll have all of those files. And then once they're there, we both have access to the exact same files.
Correct. But then we talked that we are using Final Cut Pro 10, right? And an obvious shortcoming of Final Cut Pro 10 is that it will be looking for your media on absolute paths. So if you have your media under RAID Photo Joseph, Chris would have to have his media under RAID Photo Joseph as well for him to not need to relink. If he would have it elsewhere, he would need to relink. And then once you would open the library, you would have to relink again. But then that's the part that starts becoming quite interesting. Back in December, we came up with a solution at PostLab that allows you to have your own individual folder structure for your media and your own library settings on Final Cut Pro 10, while Chris has his individual, and neither of you will need to be relinking. So now maybe I can talk a little bit about PostLab. PostLab basically is a program that's going to be managing Final Cut Pro 10 libraries in productions, and you can share those productions with anyone that has a PostLab account. So basically what will happen is you're going to be clicking on a library, start editing like you normally would. And then once you finish your edit, you're going to add a comment about what it is that you've done and send those updates up to the cloud. And your libraries are stored in the cloud. So it's very easy to share with other people. And with this individual setting that we have on PostLab, you can have your media living wherever you want, and he can have the same media in completely different folder structure, and you can just live happily ever after collaborating on Final Cut.
Right, and
that's the simple part of it.
Yeah, and it works very well. And this is something that I'm using right now on a project that I'm working on. And my collaborator is in the same town as me, but this way we don't have to drive back and forth to swap files out or email anything to each other. They literally check out the project, do their work on it. When they've checked it out, I no longer have access to it. And then when they're done, they check it back in, and now I have all those changes there. Chris, are you working with PostLab? Are you working with any remote systems like that? You're muted, Chris. There you go. Nope, still muted. Chris.
I'm going to
good.
admit that Felipe has tried many times to get me to completely adopt PostLab, but because we had I just used past tense, have a very centralized office where everything comes and goes to and from, I didn't feel like I really needed it. However, Felipe, let's talk after this broadcast.
No, but there is one thing that I wanted to say about this. We talked about PostLab being, okay, your libraries live in the cloud, you can share with another person, they open, you have these individual things. Oh, great. And then, but there is one point that I say is we as people working with editing, let's say, we are not used to one term called version. We are used to that version as, oh, I created my project version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. And then you have your project, you go back to them. We know that, but we don't know about versioning control. We know versioning control through Time Machine, but more than that, most editors, not IT people, but most editors do not know that. Now, there is a class of creatives that have always been using versioning control, which are developers. I call developers creative people because they literally are creating stuff out of thin air and giving us tools to work. versioning control allows you to really, basically, the easiest way that I can say this is you're creating snapshots of your whole library, points in time that you can revert back in time and open that previous version. So for example, if you're on version 23 of a client edit, and the client suddenly says, oh, between minute 2 and 3, version 3 was a lot better than what you've done right now. And you're like, oh, great. And then you can go just back to the library that has version 3, open as a read-only, just drag and drop to your current one, done. Much easier. And then, of course, we probably all use project snapshots. But then we know that if a project is too big, a library is too big, too many media files and too many projects, too many snapshots, every time that you open that library, it takes a very, very, very long time to open. So if you have those snapshots on the library level, you don't need to have those snapshots on the project level anymore. So I think that's...
Go ahead, sorry.
Mm.
Well, is anybody on the panel using frame.io?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's changed.
All of us.
It's changed everything for me. Yeah,
Jem, why don't you introduce us to frame.io and tell us a little bit about what that is and how it works?
So it's online platform essentially for collaborating for me with both the people that are doing posts for me as a small company and also for the client contact. And so originally it was, okay, you ship the drive or you have some sort of system that you have in place with your editor, whether they're down the street or they're across the country. And, you open up a text file and you start typing in time code as the post supervisor or the, producer director of the project. And, this sucks. This is great. Maybe we could see an alternate, cut of this. And now basically what we do is, in fact, what we do oftentimes for clients is we actually set up a frame.io account for them for the duration that we're doing a project for them. So I have my own for the company, but I'll just say, oh, it's 15, 25, whatever, $50 a month. And this is going to be your Frame.io account. And education is part of this. They don't even know how to annotate. You try to get them to do that. But basically what we do is we create internal versions of our cuts. So we'll do a rough cut, which, nowadays for a client is basically like a fine cut that has to get revised. And we'll do a rough cut. And then I will be the post supervisor and I will give all of my comments to the editor. Then that comes back, I'll do another round of comments. And then at that point, it gets moved over to a folder and you give access to how many cooks are in the kitchen from the client side. And they all basically get to review the video, but they get to stop their playhead. They get to type comments as individuals. They get to, put annotations on there so they can circle something, draw a box around it. They can say, I don't like this. This feels a little weird, whatever it's going to be. And we don't even move forward with a project now anymore until we have consolidated feedback from the client. So however many cooks there are in the kitchen, we won't go to the next step of the process until they've all put their feedback in. But it's all online. And then it can integrate with NLEs like Premiere Pro and with Final Cut Pro 10 and things like that. And it's changed my life. Honestly, it sounds ridiculous, but that one tool has taken so much of the complexity out of just dealing with my editors and my clients. And it's just going to get better, I think. I think they're investing in their resources.
And they have the right people that are paying attention to it, and the thing is one of the things that's important to me is I was doing a project for my dad, and my dad, to put it in perspective, is a lawyer and he learned how to text last week. Like he was just like, he's had it. I finally got him to get an iPhone a couple of years ago, but he had never done a text. He got into a group text where we're sending pictures of between my brothers and sisters. And he's like, I don't understand how this all works, And so that's my dad. I had him giving me feedback on Frame.io, for his project. Wow. I posted it. I sent him a link. He jumped in. He starts typing what he needs. And this is a person that, every time I go home, I have to fix iTunes for him, And so the fact that they made it so easy to for the client to interact and to give you really good data exactly where you need it, exactly what they want is amazing. And the interface just keeps on getting better. And the good thing about us is that, I've known Emery for a long time, maybe 15 years. And And Emery is just really picky, and that, you know, it's like that's good for us. You know, it's, you know, having a founder who just cares about every little bit of everything and how the flow feels and everything else. We have someone that's at least as particular as we are about this process, and that means that drive to make it better is not just some CEO who's running the business. Right. It's someone who is passionate about the experience. And I think that we're going to keep on seeing Frame.io just get better and better and better because we have someone who's really, you know, and a whole team, you know, all the guys that are connected to it are just really, really amazing. So you feel like not only is it good right now, but you know that you're on a train has somewhere to go.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen it, just to kind of put a big picture on what it looks like, when you're in Final Cut or Premiere, wherever you are, you can render a project straight to your Frame.io account, if you will, notify a client, you can authorize who can have access to it and so on, notify a client. They then go and watch it, and while they're watching it, they can stop the playhead and make a comment. I don't like the way this is here. They can annotate, they take their mouse and circle something, remove this box or make this bigger or whatever, and they can completely do that online. They can even do it on their phone. And then that actually syncs back into your NLE. So within the NLE, you can open up that project in Final Cut and say sync playhead, and you'll see in another window their comments, and then it syncs your playhead exactly to where they made that comment, so you can do whatever change it is they requested. It's an absolutely incredible system.
Well, but don't forget too that Frame.io has the capability to share projects, to share media, and you can do all of that in. And what I always used Frame.io for on the client side was, now I have an accurate indication of what the comments are and how many changes were processed. So I use it as a billing aspect too. And that's one of the sidebars of how Frame.io works, because of the way the time is indicated on it and how markers are passed back to your NLE, whether it's Adobe, whether it's Apple, whether it's Blackmagic's, you know, whether it's Avid, it doesn't really matter. And that marker content then becomes references for the client on how many changes have been done and whether the change was your fault or their fault. And that's a really powerful tool. But one of the things that I do the most out of it is actually export the markers so that you have a full shot list. Because you can, from within Premiere, export the marker tab, and it'll actually give you a little thumbnail of every indication at every point in time where it's been modified. And that's a powerful thing when you're going back and negotiating with a client that says, hey, you know, this shouldn't cost this much. And then you go, well, but here's the 97, you know, edits you made in a 1 minute section in one afternoon. And that's the powerful part assessment. Of it too. Well, yeah, ass covering.
That's awesome.
But that's the important part about this, and it's a tool for all of us to use. And while Chris might not be on the offline online world anymore, that actually is becoming more popular as the frame rates get higher, the frame sizes get higher and higher, and the data gets higher. It's going to become a necessity at some point when you start getting into systems. If we're editing on our iPads or on, you know, a tablet, you're going to have to work differently than you would if you were actually handling, you know, a 6K XOCN file from a Venice or ARRI RAW files or something along that line. So there are places for each one.
And the structure that it has around, you know, getting those comments, to just underline Gary's point, is that a lot of times when we're doing post, we have the way we kind of do it for a lot of our live events, cut downs and so on and so forth, is we'll say, we're going to give you 3 rounds of edits with no recursion, you know? And so what that means is that when you give me a set of edits for version 1, we will keep on fixing those set of edits. But if you go back, it's going to cost money, you know? So, you know, if you didn't say everything in one, then anything after that is a recursion edit. And so, and so Frame.io makes it really easy to say, well, this is what we, you know, once that you've given me these 12 pieces of feedback, that's all we can work. We're going to whittle that down in the next one, and then whittle that down in the next one, but we can't go the other direction without a bill. And so that's
definitely in post.
Sorry,
which is also,
I said recursion is a killer, and it's important that people understand
and sometimes
that we go forward.
And it's reasonable, because it's reasonable as long as there's a budget for it. Because oftentimes, once you've made those changes, you realize that this doesn't work anymore in number 1, or this, you know, something changed. It changes the feel of it, and it makes sense. It's just clients understanding that when you do that, it's just going to cost more money.
It costs
Like we'll give you a quote on what that looks like. You know, it's fine to recur. We get lots of them that have recursion. It's not like we don't argue. We're like, sure, it's just another $1,600, you know, like to do that recursion. It doesn't matter to us. But what we like to do is say, we'll give you it when we package it into, I'm going to give you 3 rounds of edits with no recursion, so that they know that we know that there's feedback loops. And usually I'm not that touchy about recursion. I mean, recursion I'm touchy about. Another edit that we have to clean something up is fine, but as long as we keep that billable set up, they can change for weeks if they want. I don't care, as long as there's a new budget.
So so anything as long as you want to pay for it.
I can do it.
Time and
I
money.
don't know if you want to pay for it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we're talking collaborative.
But I'm always yes, and this is how much it costs. Not no, we can't do it. I very rarely say no to anything. It's just like, this is the price tag to do that thing, and so that's, you know. But I don't care. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So collaborative tools. You talked about Frame.io. We talked about PostLab. Is there any other big tool that jumps to mind as something that our viewers who are doing home editing and potentially dealing with remote collaborators that they should be looking into?
I would say the most important one that we use at Slice is this, Zoom. I've been doing remote edits like this by sharing my full screen, my whole user interface with clients for 3 years. And we had the first producer I did it with, about 10 minutes into the edit, she stopped me and she said, and the reason I even tried it is that she had foot surgery. So she wasn't mobile. She couldn't leave the house. She couldn't come to the office. And she stopped me. She goes, by the way, this is wonderful, and I will never set foot in your office again. And
Says something about your office.
No, our office is actually quite nice. She just didn't want to. She just didn't want to leave her house. She lives in a vineyard. Okay, so, but this, using Zoom and sharing your screen, and it's important to, and I always remind people of this. There is a way to increase the frame rate, and there's an audio checkbox. If you check that when you go to share your screen, it actually pipes your Mac audio out to the broadcast. That's really important. So people are going, oh, it's can you turn your speakers down or up? It's just it's like they're just hard patched in.
Yeah.
And I use it. We use it all the time. I'll do 3 edits a day, communicating with people in 3 different states.
Okay.
All the time.
I'll circle back to hardware from earlier in the discussion, because I think it just ties into what Chris is talking about. I know that they're impossible to get at the moment, but as an educator, I think a small box like the A10 Mini is invaluable in the process.
Yeah.
Because for us, you know, I'm creating content, but I'm also now I've set up a platform because of all of this, finally, to actually have a calendar, and people can book consulting with me. So I can help them with training, education. I can help them figure out camera stuff. But the nice thing about a product like that, under $300, I can give it 4 feeds via HDMI. And that could be sharing my laptop for content, but it's also multiple cameras. So if I want to show somebody something, I can do that for them and just use that as a small switcher and pipe that into Zoom or whatever the platform is that you're using. And that's huge.
And I've been using it for classes, for using switchers, the ATEM switchers for classes pretty much since they came out, and it is key. You know, and not only that, you can start keying in telestrators. You know, as some of you have seen Final Cut user group, we key a telestrator, built a telestrator inside of the ATEM. And so you can do a lot of things where you can very quickly switch. And if it's presentations as well. If you want to impress a client, jump on a Zoom or a Skype or something like that and have a switcher where you're jumping between everything and you're not going, now we're going to screen share. Let me see. Oh, I got the wrong window, and you know, that's my kids. No, not that one. And you know, everything else. You're just sitting there tap, 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 tap while you're working. And it is just really, really a great experience for the client and really a great experience for everyone else. I think it's with the Mini, it's a must-have piece of hardware for anyone who wants to present over virtual conferencing.
Yeah, for anybody who's not familiar with it, the A10 Mini is a small 4-input switcher from Blackmagic that's only $300, and it's remarkable. The closest product to it is from them as well, from Blackmagic, starts at $1,000, and the big one that I use is like a $4,000 one, and we won't talk about how many what Alex uses costs, but this little
Alex,
A10 Mini
which
is
A10
incredible.
do you have? Come on, be honest.
I
ATEMs,
have
plural.
2. So I have a
Within arm's
4ME.
reach.
I have a 4ME. It's right around the corner here. I have 4ME and a 2ME, and I have them stacked together. And the reason I do that is so that they have a primary and backup. So if something went wrong, which never happens. The other reason is I do training about ATEMs for people. So I need to be able to have one switcher look at the other switcher. So I can have one switcher that I'm operating and have the other switcher that I'm piping it in, and then I have telestrators that I draw on top of things, and a bunch of other things. So 2 switchers is nice if you're teaching about the switcher. That's the big thing. And so the
I've actually done training on the ATEM with one ATEM by looping the feedback, looping the channel.
It does work.
It's very complicated. But
it is, and I found it just nicer. I did. That's how I started, and then I was like, I just need 2 switchers. So I, having the dual switching system, and then the other thing that once you use a larger switcher, that can. I don't think that the Mini will do this, but when you have HyperDecks attached to the switcher, so you're talking to a client and you say, now I want to let me show you a video, play out a video for you. You can have that loaded on the HyperDeck, and when you cut to that, it automatically rolls. So so now you have this way of really tightening the experience of the viewer, whether it's a broadcast to everyone or just a client that you're trying to impress. It's effective for both.
Yeah,
Not
and the
a
ATEM Mini,
problem.
unfortunately, you can't buy right now because they're all sold out everywhere, and they're of course manufactured in China. But they'll be back soon. Felipe, I know you were trying to get a word in here.
I can ship some for you guys because the stores here in Czech Republic, they say that they have over 300 in stock of the
Really?
ATEM Minis.
Are you
Yeah,
serious?
You should be selling them. They should be $600. You should put them on $600 online right now, and you probably.
Okay, Felipe. In
to
all
make some
seriousness, let's talk after this. I want to find out who those stores are and see if they can ship internationally.
Sure.
I'll talk to them directly because there is a lot of people trying to get these things.
there is one little device that I wanted to say here that's actually a good addition for whoever is doing live streamings, for example, is a teleprompter. So for example, right now, I have the Zoom going on my Mac, of course, but I have my camera behind a teleprompter, and I have my iPad on the teleprompter. So what I did is I used Sidecar to put the Zoom call on the teleprompter. So basically, I'm looking straight at you, Photo Joseph, and straight to the camera. So I can be looking at the camera all the time and seeing the participants.
That is absolutely brilliant. So some
And
people may not be familiar with that. A teleprompter that is designed to hold your iPad or even iPhone, those can be quite inexpensive. Even the really good ones are only a couple $100, but you can spend a lot less than that. And then, that is brilliant. So by mirroring using Sidecar on the Mac, this 4-grid or whatever we've got here up onto the iPad there, that's brilliant. And then you're looking directly into the camera because that's, I'm sure most people have noticed.
And wirelessly. And
wirelessly,
excellent.
Yeah.
And the term for it, just to make sure that if Errol Morris is watching, we know that it was his idea. So this is the Interatron process that he has many times said he should have patented. So so Errol Morris really got into using teleprompters. We copied Errol Morris about 15 years ago to do this, and we did all of our interviews for Salesforce and some of the stuff for Adobe, all using this where you have 2 teleprompters, and they were people in the same room. So Errol Morris would be like sitting in a room next to it, and if you watch like Fog of War and a bunch of other ones, what you're going to see is them looking straight into it. And one of the things that's really interesting is that eye contact, what we're seeing in a lot of our projects is that eye contact is super important, and there's something different when the teleprompter is up. One thing that we learned is most of the time when you're watching CNN, those guys are looking at a camera. They're not looking at the other people. And we actually did some work where we watched that and we realized that their eyes are converging differently. They're just looking at a direction. When there's a teleprompter, their eyes converge on the person and they also micro mirror each other. So there's this thing that we do when we're talking to regular people face to face, where our faces are doing things based on what the other person's face is doing. And you don't get that when you don't have a teleprompter on the other end. And so it's really important to get that direct eye contact and to see the other person changes the entire flavor of how they're interacting with you. And so at one point, I think we had probably 15 teleprompters, and they were 15-inch and 17-inch and 24-inch because we wanted to make sure that as almost all of our shows use these. The iPad one is amazing. I haven't thought of doing the wireless to the iPad. I'm going to definitely steal it from you, Felipe.
Yeah, me too.
So, but we had a lot of them, and they're not. They can go in different. Remember that you can always build a teleprompter. So.
Yep.
We built them because we needed ones that we could travel with, and so we printed them. We did 3D prints of the sides for little ones. So we designed them. But remember that all you need is the glass is 45 degrees. It's silvered glass at 45 degrees. You can buy that silvered glass in any major city, and you just have it to be 45 degrees over the monitor. And so we built ones that you could slide in, but you could take them apart and put them in your backpack, and then open them back up and put them and basically mount them to a. We actually built them so they'd mount straight to Lilliput little monitors. So we built them with the screws that would just go into that monitor. And so you can do a lot of this stuff. It doesn't have to be expensive, and it's something that you can easily put together. And it as Felipe said, it's a key to the operation. I'm in the process of putting the set together, so mine's not here, but I'll have one in the next week or two.
Remote interviews are excellent for that. Yeah, I used to work a few years ago. I used to work for a big corporation, and we had a broadcast operation in 4 different countries. And all our studios were being fed by video conferencing devices. And on those video conferencing devices, we had the teleprompters. And basically, the technical director would connect to the person that's going to be interviewed. And immediately on the prompter, they see the technical director. And then we're having this face-to-face conversation. And then it put them a lot at ease because they also don't see the lens of the camera. Because the lens of the camera can be very intimidating, right?
Oh, sure.
So you're just looking at me. It's just a conversation, and then you don't even tell them that's recording. Like, let's just rehearse, and then you hit record, and they just go and have a very nice take, and I'm like, okay, this was a good take, and they're like, oh, you're recording. I'm like, yeah, just in case.
People are asking for brand names. I know one, Parrot, a company called Parrot, makes ones that are designed to hold iPhones that are very small, fold up, very portable, super straightforward and simple. So look up Parrot teleprompter.
Padcaster. Prompter people, Padcaster. There's a
Padcaster. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think the prompter people the prompter people teleprompters were the easiest ones for us to use because they were just using HDMI inputs and relatively straight off monitors. So it was easier for us to connect to those.
Sure.
And they're within, they're not cheap, but they're not also as expensive as using, there's a lot of bigger ones. And what's interesting is if you spend more into the teleprompter, it usually works less well because it's really built for the old fashioned teleprompting system. And by the way, I don't use teleprompters for text almost ever if I can avoid it because we're really moving past that. People want authenticity. And, the thing you have to be very careful about if you're reading is if people see your eyes scanning, so you're usually too large of a teleprompter too close to you, it really takes the fun out of it. So
so tip on that is get it farther away and make it as small as you can, but still be able to read it.
Or just not use it. I mean, really, just use it in pieces. What I do a lot of is when we're doing post stuff, we will also oftentimes design exactly what we want. We're going to have a wide, then we're going to have a close-up, we're going to have a wide in the script. And then we have the person just do those bits in that piece. And they only have to memorize a little sentence because I'm going to cut really fast. And they memorize this little sentence and they say it. And we add a couple words on either end to make sure the inflections are correct. And then we just start cutting back and forth and doing this, all over. And it takes pressure off of them to do one long, piece. But it also makes it airtight when it comes to, there's what we've noticed is there's far more energy in the text than if you're reading a teleprompter. And because you're actually saying it, you're not just reading something. So it is harder to do it in some ways, but a teleprompter is what we've gotten used to. But I think that you're always going to get better content if you figure out how to do it without it, if you're willing to put a little work into it. If you're looking for the best kind of content, you're always going to do better without a teleprompter.
I think I've been discouraging clients to use prompters for years, and I will only do it if they absolutely insist upon it, which they do sometimes. Sure. But this is also for the audience to think about as they're setting all of this stuff up. A lot of them are going to be inclined to set up teleprompters for a different reason than Felipe is saying, which is just to basically allow them to read their scripts. And the authenticity, the conversational style, the connecting with the audience is so important nowadays, even more so. People can sniff that out, in a second. They understand that this is scripted and they feel like they're being given a message as opposed to having a conversation. And there's a huge difference. They're on opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of messaging and conversation. The messaging can be in there, but yeah.
And I think that the what I call PowerPoint pentameter, is the way people talk where they never really go all the way down and they're waiting for the next slide. And, it's the corporate version of iambic pentameter. And so And so people are becoming more and more sensitive to that. As we get used to seeing people being authentic and just saying it the way it is, that style that we see from corporate, where they're on stage and they're looking at that and they have that, PowerPoint pentameter of how they're going from slide to slide to slide with this kind of hanging, no one comes all the way down, they're hanging because they're going to the next slide. I mean, and so I've now ruined it for you. If you guys watch it, I watch it all the time and I can see it and it drives me absolutely crazy. But but that is going away. What we're going to see is people, they're going to switch over because people can't figure out why they're putting videos up and no one's watching them. Well, no one's watching them because it just feels like another corporate schlock that's pushing a product rather than really just having an authentic conversation with people.
Most of the work that I do, authentic conversation is nearly impossible because it's so strictly controlled by a bank of lawyers that if somebody ad-libs one prepositional phrase, it can change the meaning of something to the lawyers, and it's a nightmare to deal with. And so when people try and do stuff without a prompter, we had a guy coming and goes, no, I'm fine, I can just do this. His 30-minute presentation, by the time we threw out all the things that the lawyer said, oh, you can't say that, boop, pop, boop, his 30-minute presentation got cut down to like 5 minutes.
But what the other side of that, if you want to have it be exactly is to learn how to say the whole thing. If you look at there are some companies, we think of like someone just went up and did a presentation, they had a meeting a couple weeks before, and then they decided they put some slides together, and then it got all done, and then they went up on stage. For these large corporations that I work with, they started working on that presentation 6 months ago. They had the script done 3 months ago. And then for the ones that are the best, and I would say that if you watch, for instance, if you watch a Salesforce, presentation, those are probably some of the best that are out there as far as the person. I don't know about the content. I mean, you might not understand any of it, but I don't understand. I mean, I used to stream it all and I don't understand any of it. So, but if you watch the quality of the people walking around, they have memorized that to the word, to the letter, to the inflection, to that whole process. And it produces so much more. They're wandering around through the state, wandering around saying all those things, and they're not making it up, and they're not reading a teleprompter. They have memorized the entire presentation. And that is an enormous amount of work. But again, when we move to this media, when we're no longer just trying to do handshake deals, when you have to broadcast to the rest of the world, you're going to have to learn to play at a different level, or the ones that do are the ones that are going to stand out.
Yeah, I mean, Joseph, you used to do that and you did it better than most people did. I mean, in terms of some of your past history, and it was noticed and it was very impactful, and people are going to need to learn those skills as well. And it's going to be important. Yeah,
absolutely. It's tough. You hear a lot of times from people, like Alex said, you took a picture of the whole streaming setup. Live is easy, or streaming is easy, right? And this is what really went into it. But we also have to think about the wetware side of this, right? The human being on the other side that is not used to delivering a live presentation to a camera, not to a room full of people, or maybe even at all. And it's hard to do. Even the school teacher who is used to standing up in front of 30 kids now has to do it to a camera. It's a completely different experience, and that takes time to get used to.
It takes training. It's like any other school. Well, and the thing is the other thing that people don't realize is that when you're watching a politician or an expert on CNN, if they're going down that road, they have coaching. Like they go into an insert studio and they get coached for hours, days, weeks. They get hit with those questions. They get hit with, and then they get feedback on all their little ticks, how often they said all the things that they're doing with their hands. So the thing is that people are getting that kind of coaching all the time. When you see them on broadcast, you just don't know it. Right. So like anything else, when you see someone who's spent 10 years dancing or even 3 months learning how to dance, they move differently when they dance than people who are just out there having a good time. In the same sense that if you're going to broadcast and if you're going to get out there in front of a lot of people, it's a skill. Like anything else, it's a skill that you're going to have to train yourself in. You're going to have to go out and study. You might have to go out and get coaching. But those are the kind of things that we need to think about. And for teachers, we need to think about big things where we coach them and we talk to them and we go through those processes, because that is going to be key to a lot of people's success in the next decade.
Practice. Yeah.
How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Yep. Exactly. So I want to bring this conversation back around to the beginning where we were talking about events, trade shows, that sort of thing that went away, or at least went away for now, and how we replace them. And there's a question that came up earlier that isn't necessarily something that any of us have, at least as far as I know, direct expertise with, but it's an interesting question, and it is that missing piece of the puzzle of the trade show. And that's that person-to-person interaction, the encounters that you get at a trade show. I go to NAB every year, and I'm often there unpaid. I'm not there to speak for anybody. I'm there because I know that this is my opportunity to meet new people, to be introduced to new people, to have those random casual conversations as you're passing somebody you haven't seen in 10 years. You're like, oh, how you doing? And then suddenly you've got a $20,000 job out of it because you just had that random casual conversation. How do we replace that when we no longer have this mass group of people together? What do we do to replace that need? Because that need's not going away. We need to have that kind of interaction and chance encounter.
Yeah, I think that there's a new kind of social network that's required to make that work, and it's not here yet. So, but I think that you have to have things. One of the things that we did that was really successful within the Pixel Core years ago was that we had projects. We had lots of projects we were all doing together. So you got 2,000 people in 40 countries working on projects, and we put out challenges. We'd do stuff with them. We'd work on those pieces together. People would break up into teams of things that they were all interested in. So someone might be interested in the compositing. So there's 8 of them around the world that are working on compositing. And other people are doing 3D. And we broke it up over time. And we had, at one point, we had 27 teams, and they'd come back, and some of them would show their stuff every week. And there'd be a whole bunch of processes on how that worked. 10 years later, a lot of the people that were in that group that we did that with still feel connected. They still feel like they're a family together. And so the thing is it's that we have to rethink. It's not the casual encounter that we had before, but there are ways for us to work with each other to do those things. And one of the best things is finding shared points. So those shared project, shared conversations, and some of that we see on Facebook. We see it on other things where people can have conversations, Reddit. But I think that as we mix the video with all these other things and it makes it more personal, we have something that I will argue will eventually be much better than what we see because again, it won't be constrained by geographic location. And so I think it's going to be much more powerful, but it's just at its very beginning. And imagine having a meeting like this and then having us all break off into having conversations with people, and people are going to have a whole bunch of Zooms. There are going to be 20 Zooms after this show where a whole bunch of people just get into the ones that they are interested in or jump into other ones and talk. And all those systems aren't built yet, but I think that those are going to be key to having people really feel connected. And I think they'll end up feeling oftentimes more connected than what they did over drinks, or sometimes too many.
I'm sure most of these people know, but actually for people watching, Zoom actually has a breakout feature that you can enable, and you can create breakout rooms and let people go discuss something. The host can then draw everybody back together. It's super powerful. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say we have to acknowledge the fact that one of the things that we're probably dealing with is, yes, I've lost work because of NAB, but what I've really lost is I've lost that annual in-person interaction with my colleagues, with my friends, and things like that. That's a whole different subject. That's not the business side of it. It is to a degree, and maybe it's going to be that we're going to have smaller events where content creators get together. Maybe there's teams of us that go into particular industries and help those industries and have those interactions. Because if you think about NAB, it's a very broad show. It's not as focused as even Cine Gear, or the BSC show in England for our industry. And that could even get broken down into more, specific areas. So when you go to NAB, there's an overwhelm for the person who shows up there. And you could easily spend a day at AJA or at Blackmagic or at Airy or wherever it's going to be, really learning about how these tools could be used for what you're doing. So we're going to have to figure this out. I think, Alex, you're right. We don't know exactly how that all works. There's going to be a lot of things to sort out. We're still going to need some of that for ourselves in terms of the in-person thing. And, having a drink together over a Zoom meeting is not the same thing as just being able to talk shop. Because I think when we're in this forum, we are thinking about, talking about and educating what people are, we're trying to help them. And sometimes we just need together for us to just talk about shop and figure out things that then allow us to help other people. And that's also important. And I find that every year that I go to a show like NAB or Cine Gear, that I come home with more of that, and that changes my perspective. Even just today, even though we're here to discuss this whole thing, I have some notes here that are making me think about some of the ways that I'm going to help clients and communicate in different ways.
Yeah,
so yeah,
absolutely.
And I'm looking up iambic pentameter right now.
Chris mentioned the breakout rooms.
In another life,
look up
I
Shakespeare.
was a Shakespearean actor in many years ago, and so iambic pentameter was very important to our.
That actually
Ashland.
explains a lot, Alex. That somehow I didn't know that, but that really.
We're glad the Dauphin is so pleasant with us. His present and your pains we thank you for. When we have matched our rackets to these balls, we will in France, by God's grace, play a set shall strike his father's crown into 1,000. Anyway,
unbelievable.
So Chris mentioned the breakout rooms in Zoom, and I think that is a really powerful tool, which I didn't even know about until recently. I haven't been that big of a Zoom user, but now obviously I have to be. And just as a little kind of shout out to something else. Oh, look, I got an applause. I'm hosting something now that I just announced yesterday. I'm going to be hosting a virtual happy hour every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And that is right here through Zoom. PhotoJoseph.com/happy hour. Check it out, 5 p.m. Felipe is doing the math. What time will that be where I am? And you can have it with the paid account that I have. I can have up to 100 people in a room at once. You can pay to have more than that as well. But let's just say that 100 people actually come in. Clearly, we can't all communicate like this with the 100 people. And this is meant to be a casual, social, let's just hang out because we can't go to the restaurants and bars and so on anymore. But the same thing could be done for pure technical. Let's have a Final Cut editors powwow, and let's say you get 20 or 50 people in the room, and then you hit that breakout button, and you say randomly, and you can have it randomly put people into rooms of whatever size you want. And then suddenly, while obviously 20, 30, 40 people can't have a conversation together all at once, just like at a dinner table where the people sitting next to each other, kind of maybe they move around a little bit to have those little private conversations, we can force that. We can say, right, now you're in a room with 3 strangers and you're going to chat and you got 10 minutes and then we're going to pull you back in. That's a really interesting virtual networking opportunity where it is like that trade show, those casual encounters. And maybe it's not quite as...
And I haven't used it, but you can pull everybody back into the main one. So you send everybody out, and then you can pull them all back in.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
You can assign. Are you able to assign hosts to each person?
You can make co-hosts in Zoom. I don't know if you can do it per person, per group. Chris, Chris, you're muted.
Right.
You're. Maybe he's on the phone. Jem, you had something you wanted to ask. I haven't
well,
used it yet,
yeah. So what, let's say you have 50 people in there, and then there's a topic that somebody who's there could really help 7 of those people with. Can you create a breakout room and just say, okay, we're going off now and we're going to talk about that because we can now focus on that because there's 7 people who are, there.
Yeah, you can manually
assign. There's a way to randomize it, but you can also manually do it and shift people between rooms.
So Chris, the question when I think you were on the phone, the question was, can you assign a kind of a co-host per each room? Like I'm going to make a room because this, like to Jem's example, this guy's got something really good to share and these 7 people are interested. Push them in there. That guy now has control of the room.
I don't think you can do a breakout room and leave everybody in the main chat, although I suppose you can do a small breakout room and a giant breakout room.
Well, but I mean, what the question is can you assign before you do the breakouts?
Yeah.
Can you assign? These are the hosts that are going to go into the breakouts.
I don't know that you can assign a host. I don't think so.
You can assign a co-host in Zoom itself, but I don't know when it comes to the breakouts what kind of power they have.
And you know when we're going to figure this out? We're going to figure this out tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock in my little get together.
We're going to figure it out tonight at 5 p.m. with the drink in our hands. So.
Oh right, there we go. That's tonight, right? So we'll do it with yours. We'll refine it. We'll keep on experimenting with it. So 5 o'clock tonight. I'll be there. Iterate and dominate.
Iterate and dominate. There you go. PhotoJoseph.com/happy hour for those who want to join. Everybody who's in the live audience right now is welcome to join us. It's meant to be absolutely for anybody. So. So just a little social hour. All right, I think it's about time we get this thing wrapped up. We are coming. I think we're 10 minutes past Chris's hard stop. So
I have another thing to do.
You're busy.
Me too.
Well, Chris, in that case, let's start with you. Any final words, and be sure to tell people where they can find you online and all that good stuff.
You can find me online. Just use my name for just about anything. I would like to encourage everybody, my 5 friends here and everybody listening, that in these times really try and keep a schedule, you know, keep your wits about you. I got up this morning, I took a shower, I got dressed, I put shoes on, I put pants on just to do this. And I think it's important that we keep as normal as possible. And remind your clients, we still have communication that needs to happen. And there's other things that we can do that we didn't get into here. I think I'm going to do a little tutorial and I'll post it somewhere about a workflow that we just did. What day is today? We just did this week. We shot something on Monday, we cut it on Tuesday, and we posted it. And I just finalized it actually when I was looking off screen here. And I did that and nobody left their home. So there are ways that we can do work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Jim?
I agree. I mean, one of the things that I would say is that I have been working from home for 20, 25 years. I changed some things. There's 7 people in this house plus animals. So I took and repurposed this music room, and this is evolving as sort of the home office. I have a barn. I do production out there. I have a space to do that. But this is my sanctuary, right? This is where I can deal with clients. This is where I can close the door. This is where I can work every single day. I'm working really hard right now with all of this stuff going on. Yeah. And it's keeping my morale high, and working is what will keep your morale high, is actually doing things. So, you know, really do that. You can find me at the C47, THEC47, not the airplane, the clothespin, and or just Google my name. And you're going to find me, you know, with educational content. I have a YouTube channel. I'm doing live streams every week as well. My happy hour is every 3 p.m. Pacific on Wednesday. It's called Camera and Flask, and it's just a place to chat and talk shop and, you know, have a good time while we're dealing with all of this stuff. And I will be there at 5 o'clock today, Joseph, and awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Jim. Alex, closing thoughts?
Just that this has never been a better time to do what we're doing. Yeah. So, and I mean on all levels. The thing to remember, we're going through a little bit of a hiccup right now, but when it comes to being a content creator, you know, it's coming our direction. And so you just want to be, you know, take advantage of the opportunity. And right now there is a huge opportunity to experiment, huge opportunity to play with things. And, you know, I have to admit, I was slowly building up a studio and putting it together and piecing it together. And I was like, when it's just right, I'm going to turn it on. And I just turned it on. Like, I was just like, it's messy. I don't like it. There's a whole bunch of things that I'm upset about. It's not what I'm used to, but I was just like, I got to get it out here. And so, so I'm doing a lot more of that. People can find me at Alex Lindsay, LINDSAY, on Twitter. That's usually the best place to find me, because I'm usually, whatever I'm doing, I'm posting it there to tell people that, hey, I'm doing this thing. And at 7 a.m., I'm doing these production meetings. We're getting about 50 people every time, and well, it's the second day, so I don't know every time, but we have, but what we're really doing is just an open conversation. It can be comms, it can be post, it can be whatever, and it's just for people to ask questions, and it's kind of an open forum, and I'm learning stuff from other people as well as they're learning from me. So it's not really me talking to people. It's more of a, we're all getting together. I'm calling it open office or whatever, or open hours or office hours or whatever, but I think that it's going to be, I think it's some kind of commons, you know, where we all just kind of come in and talk. I'm doing it on Zoom, and I post the link. I put the registration link every day on, or the last 2 days on Twitter, and you can sign up for it. And it's just an open conversation. I have no idea where it's going to go. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. I'm worried about making sure that all of us do this better, because it will kill I made the mistake of, when I got really good at Hangouts, I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, because I felt like it was contained. I didn't want any competition. You know, I was doing really high-end work. And the mistake is that I didn't tell anyone and build up this basket that all of us can, you know, take advantage of. So I'm going to be doing more videos, more writing, more tweet. You'll see stuff every day where I'm pushing at this, because I want everyone to be successful at this, because I think this is an opportunity to change the way the world interacts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alex. And before we move to you, Gary, I just wanted to say, you pointed out that you wanted to get your room perfect before you started, but that's you got to just start. And this is advice to everybody out there watching. You're going to set things up, and you're always going to make improvements. And if you feel like, oh, I can't do it until it's perfect, you're never going to get started. Just as soon as you got the camera set up, just go, and it will get better from there. Gary, go ahead.
You can find me at Gary Adcock on Instagram and Twitter. GaryAdcock.com. I write a lot for PBC. I do the Pro Video podcast on a regular basis. I'm not doing regular weekly stuff because I've got clients that I'm doing that for. So I tend to be a little bit different on that side. But I'm around and pretty visible most of the time. So,
great.
Think about something else too. And think about how I've made a practice since I got caught in an environment where COVID-19 was 3 weeks ago, where I've called two people every day. So every day I'm reaching out to two people on the phone, just so I can keep up with people and friends and contacts. And I found that's been a real valuable resource for me to re-energize me and get me going on doing things that are better for myself, as well as making contact with other people. Because a lot of people, we've forgotten to pick up the phone and call people. And it's a valuable resource that we do. And while the internet's great for the visual stuff and everything else, occasionally you just want to have a conversation with someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gary. Felipe?
Well, you guys can find me on Twitter at BAEZ Felipe. You cannot find me on Facebook. You cannot find me on any Facebook platforms. I'm sorry. But there is also my website is in the description here of the video. Yeah, and I'm available for whoever wants to talk about workflows and getting enabled to work from home and maybe superpowering an agency and make them all just work from home. And I think I'm going to take you guys' cue and I'm going to start making happy hours in European time as well. But the thing is, I have two channels. I have a channel in English and I have a channel in Portuguese. And it's really difficult to make content for both of them at the same time. So I started giving a lot more attention to the Portuguese one because in Brazil, people really have the need of getting the same information that we're talking about here. Is difficult to get that same information in Portuguese in Brazil. So they tend to be really very happy if we bring that content there. So and that's what I'm doing so far. So unfortunately, I don't think there is a lot of people here speaking Portuguese, but I did invite several of my friends from Brazil. I think they're watching here now. But yeah, you guys can find me here on YouTube and on Twitter, on my website, and that's it. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Felipe. And for everybody watching, there is full bios and contact information in the description below for everybody on the panel. So if you missed any of that, just scroll down there and you'll find it. And of course, I'm your host, Photo Joseph. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Please do join at the happy hour, 5 p.m. on Thursdays. Tonight's the first one, so we'll see how it goes. To get there, just go to photojoseph.com/happy hour. It'll take you to where you need to go. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Oh, Chris, you had something to add?
One last thing.
Okay.
Joseph, let's do this again in a couple of weeks and see how things have progressed.
I think that's
not
not a bad idea at all. You all on board?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
Maybe we'll all have more insight and more input to this process.
And less hair.
And I was just going to say less hair, although I don't know.
Mine can't get mine cut. It's getting kind of long.
Right, yeah, you
Starting
can't
to thin
go to the
out
barber
there.
anymore.
There's not a lot of hair in this panel. Good grief.
There's not. Yeah, hey, a closing thought.
I think I have more than everybody except Alex.
Closing thought, just, for all the people out there who are not able to work like we are, we're all very fortunate in this situation that we have jobs and careers where we can easily either pivot or even take advantage of the skill set that we have to, I don't want to say take advantage of the situation, but to do well in this situation. And none of us are going to have trouble paying our rents or putting food on the table. But there are a lot of people out there that can't. There's the restaurant workers, your flower shop, your barber that, like Gary just mentioned. I canceled a beard trimming appointment, but I sent the guy the money for it anyway. So I'm like, look, I can't go, but here's the money because I can afford it and I don't want to see you go out of business. And if you can do that, there's a story on Twitter of a guy who handed his cleaning crew 3 months worth of pay and said, I'm paying you to stay away. And if you can afford it, please do. A lot of us are a lot more fortunate than a lot of people out there. This goes all over the world, wherever you are. If you can help somebody else out in need. My neighbor business just had to lay off their entire company. All of them got laid off yesterday. It's stunning what's happening right now. But it's the reality we live in. So if you can help somebody out, please do. And with that, we're going to sign it off. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. And per Chris, we're going to see you again in a couple of weeks. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See everybody.
Thank you.
Good.
Good.
Super good.
Yeah.